that allows you to protest in the first place.
I don't know how anybody could support not standing during the anthem.
No, what is this protest all about?
All eyes are on Alabama tonight.
We need results, conservative results. This is a turning point in our country. We can't have any more obstructionists.
In just a few hours, construction will begin on prototypes for President Trump's long-promised border wall. 6 companies will build a total of 8 models for the government to choose from.
President Trump unveils a new travel order.
Basically takes all the judicial objections and all those cases that judges wrote against the first 2 and plugs them in.
The clock ticks down on what is likely the final Obamacare repeal push under current voting rules.
This is not the last chance. This is the best chance.
All right, so we have been interviewing this panel all morning. Brian did it in the first hour. I did it in the second hour. They're coming back up, and you have a lot of questions for them.
We sure do. There you can see Ainsley with him just about half an hour ago talking about the pledge and the national anthem and standing or taking a knee.
Is there any footage of me from my interview?
Yeah, you're jealous?
Yeah, I'm a little jealous.
Come on. Gavin, can you find some video of Brian, please?
It's all about FaceTime. Yeah. Hey, let's bring in right now the newest member of the Fox News family. Laura Ingraham has got a brand new show. It's going to be starting at the end of October, The Ingraham Angle. And Laura joins us today. Laura, good morning to you.
Good morning.
Early trick or treat, guys. How are you?
Yeah. Laura, we're wearing you out before your show. You were on Hannity last night live. Then we get you up again. Do we have a cot in the makeup room?
Actually, yes. It's actually fun. In pajama parties, we have a good time. So all the makeup artists, they're great people. So we're good friends.
We just play the John Cougar Mellencamp and have Laura as a guest. That's all we do. Plus, we're talking a lot about the whole national anthem, whether or not to stand. Last night, I don't know if you saw, you probably did, with the Cowboys, America's team, they all took a knee. And they all got booed before the national anthem, but then afterwards, when they brought out the flags, they did stand for the national anthem.
What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think, Jerry Jones back in August said he disagreed with this whole anthem protest, and he was right when he said that. I think he was trying to strike a balance with supporting the NFL as a whole and supporting the country and the flag. I've met him a few times. He's extremely patriotic, loves the troops, does a lot for the troops. So I think, Jerry Jones himself meant no disrespect. But I will say that I think this entire exercise of the taking a knee has grown so tedious. And I think most folks watching these games, to the extent that people are still watching, because I think a lot of people are annoyed by this, it's not about the players. It really is. It's not about us or the media in general or the NFL. This is a civic tradition that we encourage all Americans to participate in because it precisely stands not for an individual, not for President Trump. It doesn't apply to a particular policy or an administration or a Supreme Court decision or a police brutality investigation. The anthem applies to the country as a whole. And if you do not stand for the national anthem, most Americans, I believe, truly believe, think you're disrespecting the country. So you might despise the president, you might hate everything he does, you have a right to do that. But that civic tradition is important as a type of glue that holds our society together. We are one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Indivisible. Now, what makes us indivisible? Our freedom, our liberty, but the civic tradition that we encourage our children, we teach our children, I hope, as they grow older, at games and public events, you stand, you take your hat off, you put your hand over your heart, and if you can sing, sing it. It's an honor. And I think most people believe these players should just be grateful that they're paid millions of dollars to play a game, as our men and women in uniform keep them safe at night. So I love seeing the veterans who are on these teams speak out. And I think they're skating on thin ice here, the NFL, and I think they're already paying a price, and the price will grow steeper with less attendance as time goes on.
How do you get? My main thing is, how do you get out of this? And do you think the president should have weighed in on this?
You know, you could make the argument that, you know, you elevate people like Kaepernick and the other anthem kneelers by even engaging. I kind of think with someone like Steph Curry, I'd say, look, I should like Steph Curry. I think he's an amazing player. Love to have him at the White House. Love to meet him, but it's his prerogative. Welcome all champions to the White House. It's amazing to reach that level of athletic achievement. We look forward to meeting all the champions. They don't come, sorry, maybe next time. I actually think that makes the president seem bigger and the protest seem smaller. However, I understand his frustration, and he speaks, you know, he speaks from the gut on these things, and that's a gut check for America.
Sure.
I do think he's speaking for a lot of Americans when he said we're tired of this.
And
but you also elevate the protest a little bit in a way that maybe he might not have done, but, you know, I could go either way on it.
Sure. Well, but between the president and the protesters, so are the fans, and we were running a little video earlier of all these fans who are destroying their memorabilia because they just feel like the teams and the players and the NFL have let them down.
No, it doesn't surprise me. Meanwhile, Villanueva's shirt is the #1 selling jersey in the NFL. Of course, Army Ranger who defies the Steelers and is an individual. These guys all claim we're individuals. We're speaking our mind. And meanwhile, he goes out there, and the coach says, "Oh no, we have to be unified on this. You can't go out there." He says, "Oh really?"
And then yesterday,
I don't think so. I don't think so.
Yeah, yesterday had a presser, and he apologized for doing that. So. Yeah. Let's move on and talk about the things that, as Secretary of Defense Mattis, he doesn't have time for football. He's got to defend the country. Let's talk about health care.
Yeah, so we heard this morning, last week it sounded really promising that something could happen this week, that this could be repealed and replaced. Doesn't look so promising now. There are 4 no votes for the GOPs. You have Susan Collins, Senator Rand Paul, Senator John McCain, and Senator Ted Cruz. Now, Ted Cruz's aides are saying that he seeks changes to the bill so that he can vote for it, but still it won't be enough. Once you get 3, it's not passing.
The problem here is that the Republicans botched it at the kickoff, to stay with the football analogy. They just botched it from the beginning. Now they're up against this, you know, supposed time deadline, and they're trying to cram through something that really isn't a real repeal. I think Rand Paul is right on that. Is it better than nothing? Maybe. But they're here because Mitch McConnell couldn't get the job done on full repeal. They're here because the Republican Party, in a reprehensible manner, has failed the working class people and the voters who elected them to do precisely what they claim they would do. Right. So it's really not about Susan Collins or John McCain or Rand Paul. It's not about that. If you are going to be the leader of the Senate, you need to get your coalition together, or stop promising things. Just say we're gonna do this, or kick the can down the road thing for the next X number of years. Stop promising that you're going to lead and improve the country.
Laura, and stop going on vacation. They're gone all of August. They're gone again in September. When things get tough, they go home. It makes no sense. But in the big picture, repeal and replace is done. Do you think that President Trump and Steve Bannon are on the ballot today, as well as Luther Strange and Judge Moore?
Yeah, they want different people.
I actually don't. I think that President Trump was right to say on Friday, whoever wins this, he's going to support vigorously, because obviously it's better than the Democrat alternative. I think it does remind us of this, though. Conservative populism isn't about one person. Donald Trump gave it the voice and the platform and a muscular defense throughout this campaign. And he went on offense on all these issues. But it's really, in the end, it's about the issues. And the issues matter in this race. I didn't endorse either candidate in this, because I just didn't think it was my place at this moment. But I do believe that the people of Alabama know their future better than anyone else, and they're going to pick the candidate that they believe best advances the Trump agenda. I don't know who they'll ultimately pick. I have to guess. I guess it would be Roy Moore. But I think it just reminds us, this movement, as Donald Trump has said, it's not about him. It's about the country, moving it forward, tamping down on political correctness, et cetera, et cetera.
We're looking live right now. Luther Strange, who currently is a senator from the great state of Alabama, he and I believe that is his wife, are going into a polling place there in Birmingham, Alabama. And I think it is safe to say we know who he's going to vote for.
Yeah, I think it's a good lesson for everyone watching, that substance matters. The left will tell us that Donald Trump won because of his celebrity or his reality show background, or because you know, he was a straight talker, the Republicans just screwed up. No, he won because of the issues. He represented the forgotten man and woman, and he needs to remember that, and this election might tell us a little bit something about where the voters' temperature is.
And Laura, just finally, don't break up with us just because you have a 10 o'clock show, okay?
No, never.
All right,
I'll never sleep just to come on with you guys.
Thanks,
Thank you, Laura. Great to see you.
Great to see you.
All right, Jillian has a Fox News alert for us this morning.
That's right. Good morning to you at home as well. This is a story we've been following all morning, and it's breaking overnight. A police officer shot in the face after a routine call turned violent. Officer Kayla Mayer ambushed by suspects with an assault rifle as she investigated a suspicious vehicle outside New York City.
Can you please get some news there? Armored truck or something to come get this officer at the shot in the face. We're right behind the suspect. We're pinned down. We can't move. You know what, Kaylee? Doing fine. It's just a quick shot right here. That's perfectly fine. Not that bad.
Both suspects are in custody. Officer Mayer is expected to survive. Today, construction will begin on prototypes for President Trump's long-promised border wall.
Build that wall. Build that wall. Build that wall.
6 companies will build a total of 8 models for the government to choose from just south of San Diego. Half will be made of concrete. The rest will be made up of other materials. Congress is now working to pass nearly $2 billion to start funding the wall. The Supreme Court canceling its hearing on President Trump's previous travel ban. Justices now need to determine if the pending case is moot after the White House announced new travel restrictions. Earlier, Judge Napolitano said people will still take issue with these new rules.
Willing to bet that some judge will enjoin it before it even kicks in. I just don't see how judges can get involved in this on their own for their own political agenda.
The Supreme Court hearing was scheduled for October 10th. So look at your headlines on this Tuesday. I'll send it back to you guys.
Right. Busy day.
Yeah,
Thank
thanks, Jillian. A Fox News alert. Desperate pleas for help down in Puerto Rico. People are waiting days for fuel, and the lines are only getting longer. Geraldo Rivera is live in San Juan next.
And what do Americans really think about those anthem protests? A panel of former NFL players, professionals, military, and parents here for a live, must-see discussion.
We are back with a Fox News alert. Look at that roof. Someone wrote, help. Puerto Rico is on the brink of a humanitarian crisis.
Meanwhile, people lining up for hours just to get fresh water and, in this case, gasoline to keep their lights on with their generators. But the good news is some help is on the way.
That's exactly right. Fox News correspondent at large, Geraldo Rivera, joins us now with the latest. Geraldo, how is everyone doing down there, and how's your family?
My family is struggling like everyone else, Ainsley. It is, you know, when civilization is tested the way Puerto Rican society has been tested with no electrical power and no water, you know, some awful things can happen. Behind me, just to give you an idea of the absolute disruption of society here, those folks aren't in line for gas. They're in line to get money out of the ATM. The credit card system has been busted. People cannot access their credit cards. They can only get to very selective ATMs to get their money. So aside from the lack of water and the lack of gasoline, there's also the lack of money, of cash to pay for it. The president last night finally addressing this critical issue in a series of tweets. I'll read them. Texas and Florida are doing great, but Puerto Rico, which was already suffering from broken infrastructure and massive debt, is in deep trouble. Its old electrical grid, which was in terrible shape, was devastated. Much of the island destroyed, with billions of dollars owed to Wall Street and the banks, which sadly must be dealt with. Food, water, and medical are top priorities, and doing well. I don't think they are doing well, with due respect to the president. And I think that what we need here in Puerto Rico is more compassion. I mean, everything is busted here. This gas station can't pump gas. That's a high-rise. Puerto Rico famous for these condos near the ocean that has no elevator. There's no water. If you want to flush the toilet on the top floor, you got to walk up 20 stories to get a gallon of water in your commode to flush it. And the electrical grid, which they are saying needs to be repaired, it doesn't need to be repaired. It needs to be totally replaced. It is savage. The business behind us on the other side of the highway here, absolutely destroyed. I don't know when and how they can get that up and functioning again. But the main thing is water, food, compassion, and a massive rebuilding program. This isn't the time for blame. This is the time to help a fellow American citizen, Stephen Ainsley.
You are right about that. All right, Geraldo, we thank you very much.
Thanks, Geraldo.
Perfect way just to show us how everything around him is all messed up.
Puerto Rico, Croatia, there's so many people that are hurting.
Meanwhile, our next guest defended our flag for 26 years and watched his fellow Marines die for it. This morning, he is disgusted by all the anthem protests in the NFL. He has a message for the commissioner that you don't want to miss.
Hope you're having a good morning so far. Some quick headlines for you. Panicked passengers scrambled to evacuate when their plane fills with smoke moments after touching down in Las Vegas.
We do have to evacuate. We do need the aisleway clear. This is for...
We had to wait for the fire department to check the plane before they let us out. Really unfortunate the air mask didn't come down. We didn't have oxygen.
Allegiant Airlines blaming the smoke on a mechanical problem. None of the 150 passengers were hurt. And a woman is snatched off the street and stuffed into a car. Surveillance video in Los Angeles showing the woman try to kick and fight her way out of the man's arms. Witnesses say she was screaming for help. The identities of that woman and her suspected kidnapper still unknown. Brian?
Minutes after the hour, as the 2017 NFL season is well underway, now into week 4, an open letter to Commissioner Roger Goodell, written by a retired Marine colonel back in 2016, is resurfacing. It's addressing the anthem protests that are on social media today and are the #1 story on most news channels like this one.
That letter was written a year ago. Turns out, though, not much has changed. That letter stating, quote, many friends, Marines, and Special Forces soldiers who worked with or for me through or fought with me through the years returned home with the American flag draped over their coffins. Now I watch multi-millionaire athletes who never did anything in their lives but play a game, respect or disrespect what brave Americans fought and died for.
That's an excerpt from his letter. Joining us right now is the man behind the letter, retired United States Colonel Jeffrey Powers, a huge Giant fan. You date all the way back to the Yale Bowl when the Giants were getting a new stadium and they had no place to play. Colonel, are you surprised we got to this point?
Yeah, I am surprised. And you said huge Giant fan. That's past history now, Brian. No longer a Giant fan. No longer a fan of the NFL. Fed up with it, actually.
Why?
It's out of control, and they're spitting on the graves of our fallen. And look, today you just announced some police officer got shot in the face. There's cops lining up right now as we speak throughout the country for roll call. They don't know when they're going out there, what's going to happen to them, if they'll get home to their families or not. But they're the bad guys, you know. And overseas you have, I know probably right now up in Afghanistan and Syria and Iraq, you got guys with rucksacks weighing 100, 120 pounds, high altitude, day in, day out, maybe 3rd, 4th, 5th deployment. They come back, if they come back at all, if they come back alive. But, you know, these guys don't care. It's all about them. You know, that's all it is.
Colonel, tell us the story about your friend, Sergeant Garrett Mongrella, and your last conversation with him.
Yeah, we were during Desert Shield working up for Desert Storm. We were in Saudi Arabia training. And I used to go visit the guys out there in the companies, and you know, they want to talk about football, and of course he was a Jersey guy like me, and we're doing the Jersey routine with each other, and he's a Giant fan. And you know, this football thing brought everybody together, and in the core everybody's green. Some guys are dark green, light green, whatever. They'll all die for each other, but there's none of this racism and everybody accusing everybody of everything else. And they're all tight, but it was kind of fun with the football teams, where you're from, and kind of brought everything together. Well, Garrett never got to see that Super Bowl that the Giants played in. And him and 13 other Marines from our task force came back with flags, but flags draped over their caskets. You know, and it just...
That was the anthem that the New York Giants won. And Whitney Houston sang the national anthem, arguably the greatest national anthem, especially because we're at war at the time, that's been sung before a game. But in the big picture, they would say, and this I've been seeing so many players right now interviewed, Colonel, they're saying that they're not disrespecting the country, they love the country, they're just trying to send a message. Do you buy that?
I don't buy that at all. You know, you can't, I heard you asking before, can you kneel and still support the truth? No. You kneel, you're spitting on them. That's what they all think. There's thousands of Americans out there. They're fed up. They're up to here, and we're to the point now. So yeah, you want to dance, dance. You want to kneel. Do a break dance for all we care. Dance with each other in the end zone. We'll call it Dancing with the Morons from now on. Have your team go hide in your little safe space in your tunnel and hide there until it's safe to come out. When the national anthem, it's disgusting. It's pathetic. Right. And one Lone Ranger comes out, and I applaud him for that. But it's really pathetic. And Roger Goodell is not a leader. He's allowed this thing to permeate, and they're going to go down. People go. I'll call you right now. Boycott these people. See this here? High-tech weapon. It's called a remote control.
Right.
Bang. Yeah.
Colonel,
cut them off.
Thank you very much, Colonel. Appreciate your time. Thanks for your service.
Thank you. Thanks for your service. Yeah.
All right, 2 minutes before the bottom of the hour. A lot of passion. What do Americans really think about those anthem protests? We have a panel of former NFL players, parents, professors, and more here for a live discussion. This is the third part, and they're really heating up now. They were just on Facebook Live.
Wanted to show unity, but they were very adamant about wanting to separate that message from the national anthem. Sean?
All right, Lisa, and as they take a knee collectively, boos can be heard from this sellout crowd in Arizona.
And that's how it went down last night with America's team, the Dallas Cowboys. Everybody took a knee. There were a lot of boos, but that was before the national anthem, and then they all stood up, locked arms, and watch the national anthem play out. Is that a good prototype for where we go from here? Continuing now with our live town hall panel. We've got a dozen people from all walks of life joining us right now. Let me ask you this, a series of questions, show of hands. According to the NFL Game Operations Manual, all players must be on the sidelines for the national anthem. They've got to be standing up. They've got to be looking in the direction of the flag and whoever is singing. If you don't, you're subject to a fine. Who thinks, going forward, if people don't do that, they should be fined in the NFL? Who thinks they should be fined? All right, most of you. Who does not think they should be fined? All right, Professor, why not?
Because this is bigger than these guidelines. And let's be clear here. I do not think that this one sole issue is the only issue that the NFL should back. I also think they should allow other issues to come into the mix because we cannot separate the sportsmen from major social injustices, and that's what we're trying to do here.
But what is getting accomplished by taking a knee?
And I think us having this town hall is what's getting accomplished, and I think we need to take this type of conversation on a national level for us to continue to talk about issues of social injustice, issues of racism, and move that forward.
Deneen, you're right behind her. What do you think?
This whole issue could have been avoided. You just mentioned the conduct code that the NFL has. Roger Goodell has failed the NFL, has failed the consumers who spend thousands of dollars to buy tickets, to seat licenses, to go to the games and have fun. What they're going to realize, Roger Goodell, the owners, the players, the coaches, they need us. We don't need them. So we'll see what will happen as this continues. But if they continue this, there's a Fox and Friends poll. 94% of Americans are opposed of what the NFL is doing.
There's an important way in the way you started this segment. You mentioned the rules that your employer has set.
Right.
And the professor just said, well, there's a bigger issue than those rules if you choose not to follow them. They're actually protesting where this started, the police claiming they didn't follow the rules. So who gets to choose which set of rules you get to follow? The police have to follow the rules. That's what they're calling for. But she's saying that the NFL players don't have to follow the rules. Your employer sets them. I work for Fox. Fox has rules. If I don't follow them, Fox can fire me.
Absolutely. And to keep in mind, one thing about the Dallas Cowboys is the fact that it was within the last year where they actually asked the NFL to honor our fallen policemen who were ambushed by that guy down in Dallas. We want to wear a little emblem. And the NFL said no. So, you know, they followed that.
That's the main problem, is that there is no consistency in their policy regarding this. The
NFL has made this worse. Can I see?
That's right.
Can I see the hands? Yes. Who thinks the NFL is the big villain here?
I think the president made it worse by his
Absolutely.
And one thing that we need to point out, while we're talking about rules, the Department of Defense paid the NFL to have these athletes stand for the anthem and out on the field. For years ago, this wasn't even required. They stayed in the locker room.
Oh, look, I think President spoke to
right back here, Burgess.
Let's put this in context, guys. I grew up in Tallahassee, Florida, segregated South, Jim Crow.
And a lot of played in the NFL,
Burgess. Played in the NFL. A lot of people don't realize that through the 40s, 50s, and 60s of the black community, with all that stuff, led our country in the growth of our middle class. We led our country in terms of men committed to marriage. We led our country in terms of the percentage of entrepreneurs. We were doing the things we needed to do because we believed in that flag. And I remember in 7th grade, walking to school early, putting the flag up and bringing it down, and knowing that if it ever touched the ground, it would be desecrated. Because I had a dad who taught me to be proud of that flag. And every defeat I've gone through life, I've always said, in this country, I can get back up again. This is one place I can do it again.
Right here in the front row, also from the NFL, Chris Valletta.
You know, thank God we live in this country, because there was a woman who was publicly executed in North Korea, and her crime was watching a Hollywood movie. Okay, that's the reality, and thank God we don't have those issues in this country, and by God's grace we never will. I think what's important to remember is that the national anthem is representing the fact that we live in this type of country. That moment, those seconds, however long it takes to sing that anthem, is the time when all of us should stand shoulder to shoulder, hand on heart, and proclaiming the fact that we live in a free society that affords us the right to protest whatever we want. And I happen to agree. I happen to feel that the protests are valid. They are, as I said, just misguided. You have to do it elsewhere. The anthem is not the place to do it. And Steve, I agree. I think the NFL is all disjointed here in terms of them not creating policies and rules.
Well, let's not talk about the NFL. Let's talk about the NHL, National Hockey League, for a moment. There was a coach who came out last year and said, anybody who's going to sit for the national anthem is going to sit for the whole game. Who thinks the NFL could take a lesson from the NHL?
Let's go Rangers.
You know, at the end of the day, the consumers are going to vote with their wallets. They're not going to go to games. They're not going to purchase products. Right. But advertisers are going to vote with tens of millions of dollars. When we start moving money out of the advertising arena and we start making our own statement on the impact of the lack of patriotism here in the NFL or NHL.
Right next to you is the professor.
Can we just say, though, that the flag affords us the opportunity to protest? Now, I agree with Deneen and David. If I'm working for an employer, they have a right to set the rules. If they don't want me to kneel, I can't kneel. But beyond that, the idea that you can't protest the flag, that's the very thing that it stands for. You can't desecrate it, but you can protest. That's what we're allowed to do.
Let me ask you this. We know that the protests have been going on for over a year, but it was gigantic this weekend, right? How many think it was because of Donald Trump who made this a big issue? All right, so, I mean, we're all together on this. Go ahead.
You should be fired. Look, hang on 1 second. Hold on.
He did at the end.
If you're an employee, I made this comment earlier. If you go into a Starbucks and right before you order your latte, the person behind the counter starts to spat off their political opinions and views, they could be subject to termination. You're an employee of a business. I played in the NFL. Believe me, they make it clear that you're an employee. Right. You should be subject to rules. You know, the rules are gray, and that's the problem.
The thing about the protests on Sunday, which so many people lost this, was the fact that Sunday was National Gold Star Mother Day, and one Gold Star mother was in attendance. And Sean, I think you know this story. You're nodding your head. And she saw somebody taking a knee, and she took a breath, and she goes, "They're protesting the flag, the same flag that my son came back in a coffin in."
By the way, there's a lack of understanding of history, and I want to give everyone watching an example. In the game in the UK, the NFL players stood for God Save the Queen. British colonial adventurism and slavery under British colonies was the biggest, call it, beneficiary of that. Then they knelt or they didn't stand for the country that reversed the course of racism, the United States of America. Learn your history is my point. Understand the context of what you're protesting.
Listen, this has been a great...
Trump disrespected the Gold Star family if we're talking about history, and also about history. When Colin Kaepernick asked what he should do to protest, a military person told him to take a knee and don't sit. So let's talk about that history.
Professor Colin Kaepernick got it started. You're absolutely right. We are going to step aside. Great debate today. Thank you very much. Up next, the interview that everyone wants to see. Ainsley sits down with the parents of Otto Warmbier. They say their son was murdered by terrorists in North Korea.
21-year-old American Otto Warmbier, a student at the University of Virginia, put on display for the media by the North Korean government.
I have made the worst mistake of my life.
Bless his heart, Otto was sentenced to 15 years of hard labor for apparently trying to take a propaganda poster from a hotel.
That's not the image that I have of my son in my heart. We were told early on by the past administration that we were urged to keep quiet, and we accepted that.
We'll be fine as a family as soon as you get home.
Hang in there, Tiger Boy. You're coming home.
The Department of State has secured the release of Otto Warmbier.
We're also thankful to Rex Tillerson and to President Trump. They wanted Otto home. Otto's not in great shape right now, and he's been through a real tough time.
He has not engaged in any purposeful movements or behaviors.
Otto had been terrorized and brutalized for 18 months.
A young college student back home to his parents, unresponsive and in a coma.
And I knelt down by his side and I hugged him, and I told him I missed him, and I was so glad that he made it home. I'm able to wear the jacket that he wore.
I just wanted to pass on word that Otto Warmbier has just passed away.
I haven't ever seen him that disturbed or emotional in a very long time.
Our thoughts and our prayers remain with his wonderful family.
Tough to watch. Otto Warmbier's parents are here, Fred and Cindy Warmbier. They're joining us now in their first television interview since that day, since their son came home and then passed away. Thank you for being here. Why did you decide you wanted to tell your story now?
Thanks for having us, Ainsley. It's been 3 months since Otto has died and we buried him, and our family has had time to come together and process this horrible situation, do some healing. But now we see North Korea claiming to be a victim, and that the world is picking on them. And we're here to tell you North Korea is not a victim. They're terrorists. They kidnapped Otto. They tortured him. They intentionally injured him. They are not victims. They're terrorists. And we're here to tell the story of what it was like when we met Otto at the airport, or to share with you what it was like when we met Otto at the airport.
Well, you said, we just want you home, Tiger Boy. And Cindy, you said, when you're home, we're going to be just fine. They sent him home in a coma, and 6 days later, he passes away. What was that like when you saw him for the first time after being gone, separated from him for a year and a half?
Well, we thought he was in a coma, but you couldn't call it a coma. When I talked to Senator Portman that morning, he said Otto was on a plane coming home, and I asked him, is there brain damage? And he said, there's severe brain damage. So what we pictured, because we're optimists, was that Otto would be asleep and maybe in a medically induced coma, and then when our doctors here would work with him and he'd get the best care and love, that he would come out of it. And Fred's going to tell you what happened when we went on the plane.
I'll describe to you what it was like for our family when we met Otto at the airport. We were in a waiting room with the medical team as the plane arrived. It was determined that the medical team would go on the plane before our family. They went on the plane. 5 minutes or so later, they came down and they said it was time for our family to go to the plane. It was myself, Cindy, Austin, and Greta. We walked over to the plane. The engines are still humming. They had just landed. We walked up the steps. When we got halfway up the steps, we heard this howling, involuntary, inhuman sound. We weren't really certain what it was. We climbed to the top of the steps and we looked in, and Otto was on the stretcher across in the plane, and he was jerking violently, making these inhuman sounds. Cindy and Greta ran off the plane. Austin and I